everyone, and warm welcome to the Democracy, Resilience and Protest Capital of Europe at this point. Happy to welcome you to sunny Sofia and discuss a topic that we think, and we know actually together with our partners from GLOBSEC, defines our long-term resilience, defines our long-term belonging to that space of democracy and human rights, which we have to cherish. And winning the peace in Ukraine and making sure that the aggressor pays and that we are able to clean up the waves of organized crime that have been produced and will be produced and continue to be produced as we speak on the Eurasian continent, but also massively globally because of the size of Russia as the aggressor, is critically important. Let me just start by thanking our partners from GLOBSEC, with whom we've been working for the past more than 10 years on issues of democratic resilience, hybrid threats, and to say that it's a meeting of minds. You know, we're happy to have them in Central and Eastern Europe. I think GLOBSEC and CSD have been the most influential, vibrant think tanks in Europe in the past years. And we're happy to share the scene today with them. On the issue at hand, how Russia has used organized crime as a weapon for its aggression and will continue using it. CSD knows best, because we've seen this firsthand in the 90s following the Yugo embargo, the sanctions on former Yugoslavia, and the waves of organized crime, the creation of the backbone of organized crime in this region. It took countries in the region, including Bulgaria, decades and lots of efforts with our partners, you know, from the US, from UK, and primarily also from the EU, to clean this act. And we still face these same issues. Now, the waves of illicit funding that we are seeing with this war in Ukraine, coming from Russia, around Russia, all the way along all its borders, you know, from the Far East, including with North Korea, China, massive waves of illicit payments, massive waves of dual-use goods trade, all the way here to the Balkans, which are a major transit hub for dual-use goods, for shadow fleet, energy laundering. So what we've seen only here, and what our CSD research shows, is that for the past year alone, the volume of illicit financial flows through the Balkans and through the Caucasus have increased to 31 billion euro, which is a huge amount of funds for the economies that are facing these threats. And that, of course, is part of a larger hybrid model, which the totalitarian state, the state-captured model that Russia has imposed, uses across the globe. I think this is exactly the model that the US will now be facing in Latin America, because this has been going on there too. The links between Latin America and Europe, you know, we've seen organized crime in Albania, in Italy, having a lot of drug-related links with Russia-enabled with Latin America. So we think we're just seeing now the tip of the iceberg. We're scratching the surface, and I'm really glad that we're going to today, both my colleagues at CSD, but also our guests from GLOBSEC are going to open the curtain a little bit, because we need to work now and be aware that this is going to take a lot of years to actually clean up. This is a huge amount of money that is within our system, also in Ukraine, as you could see. And of course, doing anti-corruption that is linked to organized crime has its political harms. but we should not be mistaken. You know, Russia is the totally corrupt one, and Ukraine is fighting to actually clean its act because of the aggression that we've seen. With that, allow me to again welcome you to today's discussion and to give the floor to my colleague Dominika Hajdu from GLOBSEC, who we're very thankful for joining us here today, for sharing their insights with us, and for sharing the way. Dominika, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruslan, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I also want to, of course, express my sincere thanks to the Center for the Study of Democracy for co-hosting with us. We haven't seen each other for a couple of years, but indeed our in person, but we have been working together for around a decade, and I think I'm also happy to see how both GLOBSEC and CSD over this past 10 years have truly grown in impact and visibility, and I'm really proud to call us partners in this space, because we have things to say. I think that the organizations from the Central and Eastern European space are extremely important and increasingly important in these conversations, because we are, as you've said, on the front line. We know how the threats work, and we experience them on an everyday basis. So why we came here, we at GLOBSEC have been looking at the issues of hybrid threats, information operations, and Russian and other malign actors' influence since around 2015. And in cooperation with the International Center for Counterterrorism, we've conducted we've issued a report which focuses on the links between criminality and Russia's malign operations. So how is Russia using criminals and also organized crime to conduct hybrid operations on our soil? And I'm really happy to have the lead of the report and the lead of the research, my colleague Kasper Rekavik from the International Center for Counterterrorism, tell you more about the findings and the juicy things, the juicy stuff that they've uncovered with his team. So I'm thankful for the cooperation in this regard. But we also wanted to come here to talk about the remedies, the measures that we can do together on the national level, but also on the European level as partners to counter these threats that are truly rising. I mean, 10 years ago when we started working on these issues, we've seen malign operations, but we sort of seen them in the more soft measures, right? It was information operations. It was influenced through civil society, academia, religious groups. But right now we have sabotage on railways. We have assassination attempts. We have kinetic attacks that are happening on the European soil. So the threat is increasing and is more and more real every day. So when it comes to the remedies that we would like to stress and talk about is the fact that the increasing blur between external and internal threats, given the fact that Russia is using operatives that are also EU citizens, oftentimes also Central and Eastern European citizens, to conduct its operations on European soil, requires a rethinking of security, right? It requires an extreme amount of cooperation and information exchange between the different sectors, between different bodies, intelligence operatives, counterterrorism bodies, police authorities, and it also requires cross-sectoral cooperation. We believe that the future lies in the cooperation with not only experts and civil society, which of course is important for us because we represent that, but also with the private sector. Because the state doesn't and cannot grasp the vastness of the threat as it is now, because it's transnational. It has no borders, and the private sector often has market insights and analysis capabilities that, unfortunately, the state does not have. So this is one of the core messages that we wanted to push across. There are also already mechanisms on anti-money laundering, for example, in this regard that work in some countries, in the UK and other countries, and those have proven really, really efficient in coming up with solutions and also in investigations of the leads that are increasingly omnipresent. So with that, I'm really happy to hand over to Rosica, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to talking informally during lunch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominika. Thank you, Ruslan, for setting the stage for today's conversation. I'm also very happy to welcome you here today. My name is Rusica Džekova. I'm the director of the Democracy Shield Task Force at the Center for the Study of Democracy, and it is my privilege to chair the discussion today. We have three brilliant experts and speakers with us today to help us start unpacking a bit this convergence between criminal networks and how state-sponsored hybrid warfare. Let us get straight to the point. So briefly presenting the three speakers, we have Ryan McLaren, analyst at the security program at the Center for the Study of Democracy. Kasper Renkavec from the International Center for Counterterrorism, a dear friend. We've been working together for quite some time, and a very distinguished expert on counterterrorism. And Mr. Zlatin Krastev, Ambassador at Large for Cybersecurity at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So thank you for being with us. So I think Dominika and Ruslan already framed the discussion for today. We want to unpack the topic by looking into how this convergence between criminal networks, criminal actors, and hybrid warfare manifests across Europe and beyond. What are the different actors and their characteristics? How this has evolved? What are the new trends? But also how to more effectively respond? Where are our blind spots at the moment? So this fusion of state and criminal power, what does it mean for European resilience, for our institutions, and for democratic security? So today you'll hear a lot about two analysis, two reports, one by CSD and the other one by GLOBSEC and the ICCT. You can grab a copy of those analyses at the registration desk. And I think they illuminate very similar trends, but also some specific aspects. I think the underlying message, however, is the same, that these criminal networks and how crime is being utilized, it's not random, it's not opportunistic, but it's part of a more systematic strategy. So let's hear more about that. And without further ado, I'll first invite Ryan to please share some of your findings with us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rosita. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As mentioned, my name is Ryan McLaren. I am a Security and Democracy Shield analyst with the Center for the Study of Democracy. Yes, perfect. Thank you also for our wonderful introductory speakers for already providing such a useful overview. I will be further providing some context prior to our panel discussion whilst presenting this report, which I co-wrote with my CSD colleagues, Dr. Atanas Rusev and Ms. Elena Clemente-Fito. The main points I will be discussing today, perfect, here we go, are on my screen here. The main point I really want to drive home today, yeah, all good, how Russia has made a strategic, calculated decision to turn to criminal groups to conduct its hybrid war on Europe. I'll primarily discuss today how the various groups utilized in this conflict, the various benefits they provide to the Russian state, and their motivations. I also want to preface this by saying this is one of the latest in a long line of CSD research which has highlighted the Russian foreign line influence, and I encourage everyone to explore these further. I think after about 10 years of briefing governments on this, we feel somewhat vindicated by now. Putin views himself at war with Europe. He's turned to organized crime from a peripheral byproduct of weak governance into a strategic decision and a core instrument of state power. He's oversaw the strategic, systematic fusing of criminal networks with state security services, economic strategy, and hybrid warfare to project influence, evade sanctions, and destabilize our democracies. Now, to begin. As Russia dramatically escalated its war in Ukraine with its attempted coup de main of the Ukrainian government in February 2022, it also waged another conflict, one far less visible, waged almost entirely in the shadows. In this shadow war, we've witnessed numerous arson attacks from warehouses in London to shopping malls in Warsaw. Just recently, we've seen yet further evidence of rail sabotage in Poland.
Here in Bulgaria, we've seen suspicious fires and explosions at arms manufacturers in Kornovat. And throughout Europe, we've seen cyber attacks, further assassination attempts, jamming of aircraft GPS systems, and many more incidents. These incidents are, of course, not isolated. They are part of what Europol has termed the woodpecker modus operandi, wherein, quote, part of a larger strategic objective of destabilization involving persistent, cumulative attacks rather than a single overwhelming attack. Much like a woodpecker weakens a tree over time through repeated strikes, hybrid threat actors engage in ongoing, seemingly minor incidents that collectively erode our stability, security, and trust in institutions. In this shadow war, the Kremlin has weaponized both organized criminal acts and indeed organized criminal networks and indeed uncoordinated criminal acts. This report reveals how, under Putin, the entire political, economic, and social environment of the Russian state has been militarized in his war on Europe. Under Putin, with his rise, the state security services and criminal networks in and around him in St. Petersburg during his time as deputy mayor went on to cannibalize the Russian state. Today, this manual regime, with Putin at the top, has seen the fusion of intelligence services, state security services, criminal networks, oligarchs, cyber criminals, and now even international low-ranking gangsters into the shadow lines. On my screen, we can see the various forms of power the Kremlin has to rely on in its war on Europe, from soft power resources like the Russian church, networks of agents of influence and family machinery as sharp power, and of course, its hard power resources like economic influence and military might. However, the Kremlin is thus nonetheless acutely aware of its material imbalances vis-à-vis the, quote, collective West, thus wary of triggering Article 5 response and thus a war with the collective forces of NATO. He's reverted to the asymmetric tactics of the Soviet Union, the active measures. Today, criminal networks are at the vanguard of this hybrid war. We, like possibly everyone joining us today, heard much in the media about these local youths being hired to conduct arson, or indeed Wagner recruiting from prisons. We wanted to go beyond this and look at the various actors, their motivations, and the benefits they provide to the Russian state. We have identified 5 to 6 types of primary actors that can be split into 3 or 4 main groups, with some overlap, of course. All of these actors give the Russian state 2 primary benefits: plausible deniability and allowing the Kremlin to take the fight to the West despite its material imbalances. So first of all, we have the Wagner Group, the silent partners. And of course, at the bottom of my screen, we can see Yevgeny Prigozhin recruiting for Wagner in a Russian prison. Wagner's reputation precedes them. Of course, they're perhaps the most notorious example of criminal involvement for Russia's foreign policy aims. However, this goes far beyond simply the recruitment of combatants from Russian prisons. They've been revealed to have been involved in illegal mining in Africa and the Middle East. They've been, which this in turn funds their FIMI operations. They've been involved in smuggling, international money laundering, and of course, famously operating troll farms to destabilize our democracies. In addition to their paramilitary benefits, above we have the night wolves who fly more under the radar. Ostensibly, this is a Russian nationalist motorcycle club who have around 5,000 to 10,000 members throughout the world. Besides their involvement in overtly criminal acts like armed robbery and the illegal production of fuel, they also act as a paramilitary group and serve as messengers for pro-Kremlin propaganda, particularly in Europe and Eastern European countries. Both these organizations operate as extensions of Kremlin influence, employing a combination of soft, hard, and sharp power to project Russian interests internationally. Then we have the so-called contractors. As you can see on my screen, we've listed here the people smugglers and the cyber criminals. Obviously, these groups operate very differently to each other, but what links them here is their status as essentially freelance gig economy workers to the Russian state. Firstly, the cyber criminal aspect is now, of course, a central component to the Kremlin's hybrid warfare strategy. Young talented IT professionals, of which there are many in Russia, are often tempted to work for state security services, particularly the GRU, SVR, and FSB, particularly some of those units on my screen now. They are tempted by essential patriotic duty, but also the underdeveloped nature of the legal Russian IT sector leaves them little choice otherwise. However, this is very expansive for the Russian armed forces to materially expand their in-house capabilities. Thus, more recently, we have seen this other MO develop, wherein talented cyber criminals within Russia and indeed internationally are offering their services on the deep web or dark net as a service. This is the more freelance approach. The Russian state offers some financial backing, of course, generally through cryptocurrency, but also state protection. And we can see the most common services offered listed on my screen here as well. Then we have the people smugglers. Concerns regarding the weaponization of migration have been growing within the EU since at least 2021, particularly on the border with Belarus. Generally, this saw the Belarusian state security services funnel refugees from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Afghanistan to the Polish border. This has now been expanded since February 2022 with aid from the Russian state security services and expanded to the Finnish and Lithuanian borders. Generally, these individuals are transited via Minsk and St. Petersburg and assisted with student and tourist visas from the Russian and Belarusian states. More recently, we've also seen another MO develop here, wherein the Russian state engages in third-party contracting to pre-existing smuggling networks based in or dominated by individuals from the Middle East and North Africa. Generally, Wagner Group has been contracting these, again, as a third party, particularly in Libya. Finally, for now, we have the famous disposables. These are the single-use gangsters that the Russian state is contracting to attack in the West. I won't speak too much here. I believe, Casper, you'll probably elaborate further. I won't step on his toes. I just want to say this further speaks to how systematic and strategic this decision is. It's a direct response to the West's expulsion of diplomats, or I should say rather, intelligence officers masquerading as diplomats in Western embassies. Approximately, I think, 750 have been expelled from the West alone since the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury in 2018. Then we have the two groups who don't so neatly fit into the categories I mentioned at the start. This is the smugglers and the sanctions evaders. These are the newly updated class of the authority. They're Kremlin-connected oligarchs and businessmen spread throughout the West. They utilize their skills, connections, and of course positions in the West, and have now been enlisted to aid Putin's war effort. This is a highly valued asset to said war effort, especially if it leads to the provision of the microchips now so desperately needed for Putin's war. It also speaks to just how much the state is controlled by Putin. These extraordinarily wealthy men and oligarchs are not regarded as wealthy in their own right. Simply, they're custodians of Kremlin money and must act in Putin's interests when called upon to continue enjoying this privileged position. One example is depicted here. This is the Ermakov network. Maxim Ermakov was recruited by Russian state security services, we think the FSB, to procure semiconductors under export sanctions from a French semiconductor company, OMIC. OMIC shipped these to an Irish intermediary who in turn shipped them to Russia via China and India. Once this initial route was shut down, it was then simply moved to Serbia and the UAE. I want to say it's not just Russian oligarchs supporting this though. We've also seen North Korea and Iran support this, and in particular we looked at how Turkey, Kazakhstan and Georgia and similar states assist in procuring dual-use items. And also Western businessmen, particularly those in Greece, UK, France and Austria, who with their insurance and financial firms help support the famous shadow fleet. Then, for now, I want to finish on this useful and unfortunate case study. The Donbass illustrates how criminal networks, paramilitaries, and Russian state converge to further Russia's foreign policy objectives. Even before 2014, the region's demographics, particularly the amount of prisons in the region, ex-prison affiliated gang members, the declining heavy industry, and of course the population of Russian language speakers. This made the region very vulnerable to Russian state capture and indeed Russian organized crime. When Moscow moved to destabilize the region, the local muscle, the enforcers, the ex-martial athletes, the veterans from the war in Chechnya, served as the first wave of manpower when Russia took the region. They were then reinforced and trained by groups like Night Wolves, the Russian state, and Wagner Group. As Ruslan alluded to, it also provides an interesting parallel to the collapse of the Yugoslavia, wherein wartime commanders and criminal bosses used the conflict to elevate themselves into political authority. Using their pre-existing skills, they then formed the political authority of the self-proclaimed People's Republics. These are now essentially criminalized pseudo-states kept alive by smuggling. The symbiotic relationship I've described throughout between these criminal groups and the state illustrates how Russia integrates non-state actors into its foreign policy apparatus. Leveraging such networks, Moscow effectively destabilizes its adversaries, extends its influence, and counters Western sanctions, also while avoiding direct accountability. This new strategy of criminal statecraft described throughout produces a double stabilizing effect for us. It erodes our rule of law whilst amplifying Russian influence, and without direct military confrontation. Putin has decided Europe is a legitimate target. I believe I'm out of time, but I'll be happy to discuss what we can do to counter this and discuss remedies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. Indeed, we'll open the discussion after we hear from all three speakers and invite you all to think of solutions and practical measures from the perspective of each of you, coming from different institutions, from civil society and others. But thank you for laying out so comprehensively the different categories, types of networks, actors. I think that further sets the stage very well, and we get a comprehensive picture of the different aspects of how criminality is being integrated in Kremlin's toolbox. But now I want to invite our second speaker to examine a bit closer the so-called disposables. Dr. Kasper Enkavek is a senior research fellow and program lead for current and emerging threats at the ICCT, so the International Center for Counterterrorism. He has extensive experience in researching counterterrorism and countering violent extremism. So he, as we heard before, is the lead author of the report Russia's Crime Terror Nexus, where you mapped over 130 perpetrators, right? Profiled them, conducting different types of kinetic campaigns in Europe. So I'm really looking forward to hear more about recruitment patterns, their profiles, and how this fits into the broader Kremlin strategy. Kasper, take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosica. It's very good to be back in Sofia. It's been too many years. A few confessions to make and a few caveats. Firstly, I need to apologize. All men have jackets here, almost all of them. I don't. I've spent too much time in Norway. In Norway, there is only one jacket, and the king wears this jacket for the Christmas address. I cannot pretend I'm like the Norwegian king. Therefore, I do not have a jacket. My apologies. I'll be working on that. Secondly, very many thanks to CSD and Rosica in particular. We've been working on issues for many, many years together. Hat tip to GLOBSEC. I mean, my heart's in GLOBSEC. I used to work there, and now I work with GLOBSEC at the International Center for Counterterrorism. So let me get right at it. And lastly, it's a bit of a Christmas come early, because I can come to Sofia, a place that I was told in which Russia has its own fans, and I can say nice things about Russia. This is brilliant. I'm a Pole, by the way, so you get my drift and you get my gist. Some of you might probably think I'm not objective, but I will try to convince you otherwise on this. So let's have a go at this. So we always open up with, yes, this slide, because it's uplifting, right? Kaja Kallas says great things, and we always do this to actually inspire you to change the language when you talk about these issues. Because everyone talks about sabotage, diversion, hybrid warfare, the French like this term, but no one wants to talk about terrorism in this context. Because terrorism is something done by people from the bottom up, usually having a slightly different color of skin the majority of population of Sofia. I'm sorry for this kind of slightly racist remark, but this is how it's viewed. Now, if a state does that, that's complicated. If it's Iran, well, it's in the Middle East, broadly speaking, that's fine, we're fine with it. But if it's somebody else, we're uncomfortable. We're looking for terms to name it. And this is also to inspire you to actually use that language, because this is essentially about terrorism. Now, we worked on these issues also with CSD a decade ago on ISIS crime terror nexus. And when we were researching it, and CSD was in the thick of it with us, we found out that 30% of ISIS in Europe were former criminals. And everyone was saying crime terror nexus. Now, when we were researching this group now, 131 perpetrators that we looked at, we also found out that 30% of them were former criminals. Now, can we call this a crime terror nexus, just like the ISIS one? I would say we can, but let's just say there are people out there in Europe who don't like it. But we're here to actually also change the language. Remember that we're trying to actually get that in place. So we're operating in a reality that there's something new, inverted commas, threatening Europe. By the way, this is the Marywilska shopping center in Poland, the biggest shopping mall in our country that was burned by somebody. I'll be winking at you at times throughout this presentation, and whenever a Pole winks at you, they mean Russia. Just to kind of put it in a context. Now, we're operating against the backdrop of some definitions that are associated with this. Hybrid warfare in my country, and we should know, we have a bit of a history with Russia, has been associated with the little green man. Then hybrid warfare was associated with disinformation. But no one ever had the courage, and I blame myself as well, to actually say that it can be something else. And oops, it can be something else. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble navigating this. Well, the famous drones that fly over the Lithuanian-Belarusian border smuggling cigarettes, you can take them as they're just smuggling cigarettes. But this is done by somebody else, and I'll set the scene and set the context for you in a second. So, what is this context? Russia has a specific history of criminality. If you look at point 1, this is an old Russian or Soviet saying. The law is like a telephone pole. You cannot jump over it, but you can always walk around it. That's basically a neat summary. Criminals have a rather interesting standing in the Russian society. They are romanticized. They are seen as people who live the life to the max and live the life to the full. They're not exactly, let's say, frowned upon immediately. And the second quote here is, for me, I really love this. This is the Russian police speaking to a Russian reporter, by the way, so it's not made up by some Pole. Don't you worry about that. This is essentially them admitting that the system is what it is. It's always been like that, and we just kind of continue. This is how we roll. It leads to a situation in which which point? Yes, point 2, in which up to 20% of the Russian or pre-downfall of Soviet Union, Russian economy or Soviet economy was actually black economy. This is the reality. Under Brezhnev, up to 17% of the Russian economy, Soviet economy, I'm sorry, I'm just like substituting one for the other, was illicit. This is the reality in which we're thinking. Now, obviously, when I say this in Warsaw, when I say this in Sofia, people go like, yeah, it was a bit like that here as well. But I can assure you that it was less. They were world champions in this. And now they're using the experiences they had from before 89, 91 to actually throw them at us. And there's a number there, 6.10 billion euros. You'll find that in our report. It's actually a number of goods that they're probably getting outside of the oil, gas, and stuff like that, how they're getting via us or from us while evading sanctions. Non-oil, non-gas, non-minerals, simple stuff. Now, of course, it goes the other way around, and I'll give you examples, and the report is actually using some of these on its pages. So let me not maybe spend too much time on this. But basically, this is to actually show you the context in which we're operating. And the main thing I want you to kind of like remember, Ryan laid it out neatly, so maybe just one thing. Toomas Ilves, the president of Estonia, once said that his security organization called Kapo is combating both smugglers and Russian spies. It has the remit to combat both. He was very troubled by the fact that sometimes it's the same person. And he said it out loud. Now, when I say this to my Western European colleagues, they're dumbfounded. How can you wear two hats? How can you wear three hats? How can you wear four hats? You just wear one, you're honest. As Western people should be. But we're dealing with something very, very different here. But something, I'm trying to tell you, predates what's happening now. That's been in the blood and in the DNA. And it's only so much easier for Russia to actually throw it back at us. And I'll get to the other nexus that Ryan mentioned. So, what happened? Our theory is that in the spring of 2022, when the three-day invasion parade in Kiev failed, the Russian services sat around the table and decided, okay, we need to do something. We have 600 of our officers coming back, their budgets are coming back. The budgets for their operation, the budgets for the renting of flats in places such as Sofia, Warsaw, Berlin, London, the budgets for their kids' private education, they're all coming back to us. We have a lot of money now. We need to do something. And they decided, and I always use this English phrase, don't know if it exists in Bulgarian, to throw the sink at someone. But the problem is, they were starting from scratch. Our theory, let's say, our assumption is that they were picking clues from ISIS. They effectively launched a long leash, remote-controlled terrorism campaign, which is poor, and it's not very successful now. But I'll give you one example. Ryan mentioned it. 2 weeks ago, right, the sabotage on the Polish rail, everyone calls it the sabotage on the Polish rail. There was a train with 500 people that got stopped. That could have been delayed. People would have died. We would be in a completely different paradigm, and we'd be talking about terrorism. And it got personal to me. It happened outside the town of Garwolin in southeastern Poland, in which everyone is called Rękawek. I'm also called Rękawek. So that's how closely I feel it. So when you think I'm talking about some, arcane stuff, we're in Bulgaria, we love Russia, no, they're not going to touch us, which is ridiculous given the fact that actually Russia's campaign kind of started in Bulgaria with a certain assassination attempt of a certain arms dealer. And yes, Ryan mentioned that. Also Bulgarian citizens feature in our database of the 131 perpetrators. You know which plot I'm talking about, no need to actually go on about it, because it's been used and reused by the media too much, I would say. It kind of concerns everyone. Okay, so what happened? Mostly, they were trying to blow things up. They vandalized a few places, sometimes in a very interesting fashion, and here we go. You dress it up as an anti-Semitic attack. You dress it up as an anti-systemic attack. And you can guess that the handler or the organizer of that very attack wasn't telling the poor souls that, hi, I'm Gennady from the Russian embassy and I need you to do this. No. The connection was made on a different platform. I always use this example, and my Western colleagues are always dumbfounded. The attack in Uzhhorod, which precedes this data set, 2018, when a German journalist affiliated with the AfD party in the Bundestag, because he works for an AfD parliamentarian, AfD, for those who don't know, it's a far-right political party in Germany, he organizes a terrorist attack in Ukraine on a Hungarian cultural center staged by Polish far-right radicals. Layers of deniability. When I speak about this in places like Rome, Paris, London, The Hague, they all look at me and go like, how is this possible? Well, that's precisely what's happening here. If you're thinking we're going to find a nice note saying, I've been tasked by Gennady from SVR or GRU to do this, probably you won't. But this is more or less what's been happening, right? So mostly arson, explosions, and vandalism. But also, hey, and this is also what Ryan mentioned, assassination attempts. Don't forget that, and obviously talking about this in Bulgaria is kind of obvious. So, when did it happen? Had this been correlated perfectly with the Russian campaign against Ukraine, it would be happening here. This was the worst moment. Right? This was the worst moment for the Russian troops. So if this is to offset, and if it's perfectly synchronized, then it would be happening there. Well, it peaks a year later. So if you ever think that this is all perfectly synchronized and that Russia plays 5D chess underwater, whereas we are still playing polo, no. They really had to think. Then they had to start it. Then they had to bribe people. Then they had to have a cut for themselves. And finally, this comes through. But it's not over, as the events from my country of the last 2 weeks actually make it rather plain. Now, there are all sorts of theories why this happens in these countries. People look at this map and go, oh, the eastern flank is attacked. Of course it is, because they hate us. I know this. But my theory is that the officer for my country, some Alexei, is just a bit more capable than the officer for Italy, called Sasha. Sasha probably is having a bad divorce, drinking too much, so he only did one thing in Italy, whereas Alexei did 20 things in Poland. That's how it works. It's not 5D underwater chess. Don't be afraid of it too much. Let's put it this way. Be afraid, be concerned. But again, it's not 5D underwater chess, because now we get to the main point. And let me spend last few minutes on this slide. Who did it? Ryan mentioned this to you, in their 30s, post-Soviet, right? I mean, there's plenty of people in Europe who are post-Soviet and in their 30s. That's a rather big group. And if we were to start stigmatizing them, then I don't think we would be called European Union anymore. Let's put it this way. So let's maybe zoom in. Yes, they're male. Bang. Well, not great. There's plenty of male post-Soviet citizens or post-Soviet people living, post-Soviet, I hate that phrase. I'm post-communist, right? They're post-Soviet. Living in Europe. Average age around 30, right? Okay, sure. But here comes the third point is interesting. And this is just like ISIS. ISIS was recruiting through family. ISIS was recruiting through friends. The media will tell you that all of this happens on Telegram, the mysterious tool, right, that we all have on our phones. And partly it's true, but it also happens face to face, just like the good old ISIS. And it's your friend, it's your wife, it's your spouse, or your husband who comes in and to say, look, here's an offer, we can do this, and we will enrich ourselves. This is the one major difference now. It's all for money. Now, as Dominika, Ruslan, and Ryan mentioned, and Rosica as well, these are 30% of them are people with criminal pasts. Money speaks to them, and they're happy to go for it if the offer is right. The offers range from as little as €5 to 10,000 euros. That's the span. So the phrase disposable agents, single-use agents, I prefer poor man's terrorists who are supposed to get rich. And they want to do it again. You are offered a scale up. Do one thing for €5, then the next one's going to be for 1,000, and then the next one's going to be for 5,000. That's more or less what we're looking at. Right, from post-Soviet countries. Well, indeed, but guess why? It's easier to recruit them. If you think the FSB that has a hand in it is a multilingual organization which is sophisticated and plays 5D chess underwater, no, they speak Russian. They look for Russian speakers. And where do they find the Russian speakers? Well, amongst Ukrainians, amongst Belarusians, amongst Moldovans, Estonians as well, Russian Estonians. They might even find a Pole or two who speaks Russian. They might even find a Bulgarian who speaks Russian. They're not sophisticated linguists. That's the easier bit. Now, the sell can be easier, especially if you're coming from a truly post-Soviet country. Look, I'll be now undiplomatic. More than a decade ago, President Zelensky danced in Moscow, in front of Solovyov. It's one cultural space. It's so much easier to refer to these pop cultural events, actors, writers, concepts that these guys have because they're coming from the post-Soviet space. That's why they go for it. Now, most of our attackers, around a 50-50 split. Some stay at home and do these attacks at home where they are based. They wouldn't call it home because, for example, they are refugees or immigrants. But some travel. Fascinating case, Moldovans who work in Italy construction sites, then they move to Belgium and then they stage an attack in Paris. You should see the faces of our French interlocutors and they're saying like, well, I mean, this is worse than ISIS. ISIS was coming back home. ISIS was attacking what it knew. Now this is moving. It can move. They have Schengen visas. They're Europeans, right? They want to be European. Actually, they talk like that, and they want to be like that. So please remember that this is the issue. Yes, criminal backgrounds, definitely. 30% of the people we have in our data set are from that background. All sorts. Sometimes it's a smuggler. Sometimes it's someone who was involved in essentially a murder on the fringes, not political. Sometimes it's someone who's just a punk, but they're looking for something, and Russia offers that something. Yes, usually the first contact is online. Yes, quite often it's Telegram. Yes, it is. I mean, I'll put my hands up. But then quite often you try to bring it into the offline realm. You cannot send your officer who was just kicked out of a given country into Moscow. He cannot, or she cannot, usually it's a he, very sexist organizations, GRU and FSB. They cannot travel back. They cannot travel back to Europe. So you're looking for some kind of a middle person. And that middle person are the spouses and friends who are tasked to recruit others. This is to try to keep some sort of operational security, but as you can imagine, it is leaking. That's why we're calling it poor man's terrorists. But it seems to me that they might be getting better, and it seems to me that as the years go by, they might actually have a few tricks up their sleeve. So essentially what you're seeing here, right, this like, you know, what happened, the show's not over yet. And it will probably get worse, and we should all be ready for that. On that optimistic note, I'll end, and let's maybe have a chat later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kasper. Yeah, you kind of really made it very difficult now for our last speaker to speak to start discussing responses, because you laid out so perfectly the blurring lines between crime, coercion, terrorism, but also thank you for laying out so in such detail the profiles of perpetrators, and that of course presents new challenges. And I, as someone who has been doing a lot of research on countering violent extremism, and when we discuss this issue in Europe, indeed in the counter-terrorism, counter-violent extremism sphere, there is indeed like law enforcement, intelligence services coming forward and saying, it's so difficult, like we don't know, we see something, especially online, recruitment, violent actions being prepared. We don't know who's behind that. Is that now a terrorist group? Is this Russia? Is this Iran? How do we go about that? So I'm pleased now to invite our third speaker to first react to what we just heard from your perspective. Very brief, I've introduced to you already, but let's do that once again. So finally, we're joined by Zlatin Krastev, Ambassador at Large for Cybersecurity at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He brings a strategic foreign policy and cyber diplomacy perspective, having served in key diplomatic positions, including at NATO headquarters, and being very recently officially appointed as Bulgaria's ambassador to Ukraine. So you bring a really unique perspective. So, Mr. Krastev, first of all, yes, please share with us your thoughts on what we just heard from Ryan and Kasper, but then also guide us through this complexity. How should we rethink this relationship between internal security and foreign policy? What mindset shifts? What also shifts in institutional infrastructures? Modus operandi do we need to do so that foreign affairs, defense, and interior infrastructures adapt quicker to what we're seeing? So please take the floor.
So thank you very much to both speakers, also to GLOBSEC and CSD. It was really interesting discussion. As a diplomat, I don't do slides to have possible deniability afterwards. But this was really, exhaustive. I almost think I don't have anything to add, probably. But maybe I'll react to what Kasper said about the guy responsible for Poland, like very active, and the others not so active. Actually, it might be the case that the others are also active and good, but it's a reference to something you said earlier. It's difficult for states to say, okay, this actually happened in our territory. with the democratic process and elections always around the corner, it's very difficult to say, okay, we allow this to happen on our territory. And so this is one of the problems you asked me to handle. So how we acknowledge, and in the slides where there was also like many different names, we call this, and if it's ISIS, we call it terrorism. If it's Russia, Iran, or somebody else, it is more difficult. And this goes back probably to what we all in Western world at school, that the First World War could have been avoided if it was not like miscalculation or something happened. So we are taught that when things get serious, we have to be very careful what we say, who we attribute something, in order to avoid escalation. So I call this the fallacy of miscalculation management. And we've seen this very clearly when this current phase of the war in 2022 started. In the beginning, we were afraid to give the Ukrainians even javelins. Then it was all the very different kinds of weapons we were afraid to give to them because we were afraid, oh, this might lead to Third World War. And this is a big problem. But first of all, about the geopolitical context, and this has been talked already, but we are really in a very in a colossal shift in international security, and it is difficult. It's happening so fast, even in this year, or even last week when the new national security strategy of the United States came out. So what debates about it, and probably CSD will make a different conference about it. But one thing is clear in this security concept is that it's about realism, and that we have to do the things we need to do with the means we have, and often there are some things we want to do, but we don't have the resources or capabilities to do. So we have to focus on the basics. But first of all, so what we can do about all those elements which were discussed already. So first of all, and it is clear that we should continue to support Ukraine, because what Russia is doing to Ukraine, to us, is less than 1% of what is done to Ukraine on a daily basis. I was, as a chargé d'affaires to NATO, I was in the group of first 10 ambassadors to go to Ukraine after the war started. And they showed us a confidential map of the places in Kiev where the Russians have implanted cells, which were, that's why it was said the 3-day war, because they had people on the ground. And they were planning for them to activate them and to help them take over the city. And also, we went to their electrical company, and they told us, we are the primary target of Russia. They don't spare any kind of weapon, kinetic, cyber warfare, everything to bring us down. So Ukraine has a real-life experience of handling what we are handling in much greater scale and intensity than what we can imagine. So we have to learn from them, take their experience, help them survive, because if they stand between us and Russia, we are much more protected. But also they have the knowledge we can, and this is what the first things when I go next year in January as ambassador, I'll do, try to learn from this knowledge. Second thing, what we need to do is we need to empower our specialized services to do more investigative work. And by the way, as you said, it's not all doom and boom. Those two presentations were very detailed, very good, and portrayed like a picture we are losing this battle. But it's not exactly the case. How we came to this? It came, as it was said, we expelled 750 operatives under diplomatic cover as a persona non grata. So Russia, this was not their first choice to use criminal networks, but they were forced because their well-trained operatives could no longer do the way the usual business. So we can do things in the West which make Russia to change the way they do things. We just need to do it like more often to adapt to the new strategies they're exploring. And this is part of the problem because democracies inherently prefer stability. When you come to power as a government, you are happy because you are able to win elections with something. You want to do it next time again the same thing. If somebody forces you to change, you're not sure what will be the electoral outcome. So it's difficult. That's why we could have expelled the Russian operatives after 2014, and we expelled some of them. But it took us to 2022 and 23 to expel many of them because there's still like something to push us to go out of the comfort zone. It is often not difficult, but not easy. I remember my first working day on Washington, D.C. was September the 11th, 2001, on the terrorist attacks there. And it changed everything for America, but also what it did, after a couple of months of analysis, the President Bush back then, he gave a speech to the people and said, listen, in order to tackle this threat, this new threat, we have to do many things, and he elaborated. But one of the things he said, directed to his people, is that we need more surveillance. And in order to catch the bad guys, we need to surveil the entire population. So you should be ready to give up some of your privacy and other things in order to catch the bad guys. We need to able, and of course this is controversial. It goes to human rights and individual rights and everything. But at the end, it's probably something we in Europe also need to think. If we want to catch all those elements, we need the data. We need, and this is down to surveillance. We do it currently, and I know there are people from the services here, but probably we need to empower them to do this more. And of course, there needs to be debate among the civil society how this is done in order to avoid problems like we do this thing. And in Bulgaria, we are scared, like, because 35 years ago, we had like very scary police who were surveilling everything. So, yeah, but I mean, it's something we need to think about. Also, it was a lot of talk about the money. So if you are not sure who did it, how it did it, always a good thing is to follow the money. And we are doing this currently, but probably we need to do it even further to a greater extent, to go against new things like cryptocurrency, and do so. If there was a financial transaction someplace, we need to be able to track it, preferably before, but if not afterwards, in order to be able to make them pay, because this is the main thing. If we are just trying to prevent all those types of things, it's very difficult. But if they know, because currently there is a calculus which Russia and those criminal networks are doing. Okay, so I'm offered to do this. What is the reward for me, like in dollars, and what is the punishment? They don't see big punishment from our side. Neither Russia nor the criminals. So okay, so the money is worth it. In any case, it's better. So, like Dostoevsky said it 150 years ago, it's crime and punishment, or преступление и наказание in Russian, because it was, who knows Russians in Bulgaria. But I mean, it's we need to make it clear to them that there will be punishment, and the punishment will be severe, so they don't attempt to do it. in NATO speak, we call this deterrence. It's deterrence. It means that we have the capability to do much more harm to you if you do something to us. We don't do it now because we expect you don't to do something to us. Yeah, so I had many things to say, but I think, guys, you were outstanding, so I'll give more time for questions, and thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we're ready to open the discussion for the audience. Before we do that, you mentioned already quite a lot of important steps and measures that need to be taken. So we need the data, we need to empower specialized services, and then, of course, follow the money, just to pick up on a few. Before we invite the audience to ask questions, can I please ask Ryan and Kasper, if you had to highlight, because in both your reports you have a lot of recommendations and measures. If you had to highlight one very critical, important step for the next, let's say, year to tackle the complex threat, what would you highlight? Is this more about changing politically reframing the issue, changing legislation and definitions indeed? Is it about creating new operational structures that are more multidisciplinary than we have now, working still sometimes in silos, counterterrorism, hybrid warfare, and so on, and some countries even don't have specialized structures dealing with hybrid warfare? Is it stopping online recruitment? So what will be your one choice of a critical measure for Europe?
I'll give you two quick ones. I would say yes, to your point. As we recently mentioned in our latest policy brief, we need an entirely new strategic ontology. Putin views himself and the Russian state at war with us. We don't have a choice in this. We need to act like it. And not to get too poetic, but to quote Harry Truman, like, how many times do you need to get hit over the head to know who's hitting you? We need to name and shame Russia. We need to act like we're at war. And I think we need to adopt a defense-forward strategy to be more practical. Again, like you said, we operate in silos. Our approach to open borderless trade is completely contradictory to how we view our matters of security. We don't cooperate with each other. It's a member state by member state responsibility. So yeah, I think the FBI here actually provides a good measure. Organized crime units with kind of hybrid warfare counterintelligence units operate under the same roof. We don't do that here. I think we need a fully fledged intelligence cooperation service here in Europe.
So really quickly, first point is that we all talk about, and rightly so, NATO goal 5%. It's great if you buy tanks and fighter jets, and I'm saying this as a Pole, fully conscious of the fact that we're actually making these purchases. But there is this 1.5% that you can spend on something else. And this something else is internal security. So it kind of goes back to the points you cannot forget that. It's not sexy, it's horrible, oh Jesus Christ, more security services, oh how horrible it is. But no other way about it. Maybe slightly shifting to what Ryan said, it's not that these structures do not operate under the same roof, but it seems to me that, for example, in Europe, certain countries specialize and see the threat through the lenses of X, whereas others see it through the lenses of Y. And my recommendation to the true Westerners, let's put it this way, as I don't consider myself a true Westerner, unfortunately, maybe. For the true Westerners is that use the apparatus you've built up over the last 2 decades to fight terrorism, to prevent terrorism, to actually go into the customers of mine. And at the same time, to the Easterners, so to my country, and that's how I'm trying to bridge this, Russia is not only gas lines, pipelines, Tamanovskaya division, this army, combined arms army, cybersecurity, disinformation. It is, but it's also extremism and terrorism. So learn from each other in this sense. So not so much not under the same roof. They sometimes are under the same roof, but sometimes one department in country A is the size of 2 people, and whereas the other is the size of 100, and the one with the 100 looks down on the 2, rightly so to some extent. I would like that changed, and more money for the one with 2 people. That would be my, let's say, recommendation.
No, I just want to support what has been said, and yeah, they said name and shame Russia. It's not easy, as I pointed, but we need to understand how that we need to move this way. I remember in 2014 it was very difficult to convince people in Western Europe that Russia is really a threat. It's not like a one-time event, but things have been developing very quickly, and we really need to take much more serious actions than we are used to.
Thank you so much. I would love to ask further questions, but let's now invite also our audience. Are there questions? Yes. My colleague will pass you on the microphone, and then Ruslan.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the speakers. My question is to Kasper. As a person who has not read your report, I should admit, I'm interested about your taxonomy of those incidents. How did you figure out? Did you waited for an incident, like for a perpetrator to be appointed by the country as having been from Russia, or did you kind of took it a bit of a broader? Because to be quite frank, the number of incidents is quite meager as to what I have been witnessing, especially in the cyber attacks that you have mentioned. Like practically every month there's like a new Telegram message from all of those kind of groups that you have mentioned that is either creating a DDoS attacks or anything. So I would say your approach of calling those like the specifying the number, and also could you give us some more examples about those incidents outside of the arson and the train things, for example? Did you include, when you talk about vandalism, did you include the Star of David incident in France? What else did you include in your sample? And do you think that you have, last one, do you think that you have things that you had to omit, but you were certain that they were part of this Russian tactics, but you see you had semi-perpetrated, it wasn't really sure, so you had to omit a couple of those things?
Thank you for the questions. I'll try and tackle them briefly. Yes, acts of vandalism, such as the one you mentioned, we did include. So if someone's thinking that we think kinetic in purely military terms in this report, then they would be wrong. We are thinking mostly offline incidents. You're talking about the online ones. Of course, there's more. It's easier to do. You can do them safely from the territory of Russia. So that is something that we haven't been looking at, and we strictly wanted, because it's also the craze in our field, and Rosica knows this. Extremism, terrorism is now all online. Everything is online, and then if you mesh that with cyber, then you have the perfect storm. We specifically tried to avoid that, and we looked into things that happened outside. So that's one answer. Secondly, did we have incidents? Well, there were incidents to which we couldn't match perpetrators, and we were asking. And we were told, sometimes we were also told, don't ask in certain countries, because this is an ongoing investigation. Right? If you ask in the Baltic states, they'll wink at you, and you know when to stop. Now, we are not security services here. We're operating on open sources. We're operating on court documents. We start with the press, and we also interviewed around 50 people who are looking into this on nation-to-nation basis. So someone, we've got the data set on a kind of like a macro level, but I spend hours talking to Swedish experts or German experts who would be telling me against this or that. Interesting things you're asking, like what's the specifics? The specifics go like this. Grey Zone, familiar with the Telegram channel? Not the media. Grey Zone is a Telegram channel that likes Wagner. And they put up a call saying, if you want to have a job, come and join us. And you click on that link, and it takes you to a Telegram account, and then another one, and then another one, then another one, then another one. It's like, washing dirty money. And then you are faced with someone who calls themselves a bot. It's not a bot, who gives you an offer. But it starts from the very wide, yes, disinfo / cyber affair thing that directs you into that, let's say, maze. And from there, you either take the job or you don't. And if you do it well, then you are scaled up to do other jobs, where you're supposed to bring in your friends, your family. Starts early, starts easy, and then it gets more difficult. At first you spray something, and then you're asked to fly a drone over something, and then you're done. And lastly, one more thing. I've been looking at this stuff since 2014. When I say this stuff, meaning people who went to fight for Russia in 2014. I've interviewed quite a few of them. It's a fascinating intellectual experience, I can tell you. And unfortunately, some of them are now dead because they've been mobilized to fight in 2022 and died, for example, in Bakhmut, but fine. But some of them fought there, and it was very legal to do that if you're a EU citizen, because you're not joining ISIS. And then you could come back. And a fascinating case is in Germany. A guy who fought in 2014, he pretends he didn't go. He's German, Russian, really Kazakh. Russian Kazakh, then in his youth, he goes to Germany, becomes German. There is this Russian passport somewhere in the cupboard behind him, and he uses that passport to go there in 2014. In 2023, he's tasked to do rail sabotage. He's reactivated. Now, we have such people around Europe. I can roll out 100 names for you. They're mostly doing disinfo nonsense. There's a guy called Nemo on Italian TV. Rai Uno has him as an expert on Russia-Ukraine war. He fought for Russia in 2014. It's that nonsensical. Now, these guys mostly do disinfo. Imagine if you activate them in this way. So if you're asking me about fancy events, well, here's your fancy event. I would put it this way.
Thank you. I have so many questions. I don't want to monopolize, but going back to crime and punishment and the hitter with the bat. We've been trying for more than 10 years to identify where the pressure points where we could have an impact, to actually identify what can we do to make Russia pay. And I'm thinking only just to ask you to, if you have any insights on what can we do on the global level. That is the Security Council of the UN, China in particular. How can we get them over to say, you know, this is a terrorist state? What we've seen there is an agreement, it seems, by the other members, and I think this is a major stopping thing, is that Russia cannot lose because it's a nuclear state, which means if they lose, we lose too, because they're gonna, you know, be cornered. And I would love to hear your perspective, in particular on the you know, counterterrorism thing. Then on a more practical level, next thing we could do, I absolutely agree, and I just wonder, now that you mention it, I'm sure it's happening a lot, and Rossi knows probably a lot of that, but how can we use these instruments with Russia? You know, I go back to MH17, to the Azeri plane, to the abduction of the plane of Ryanair in Belarus. How many more times do we have to hit us to be able to, what's stopping us? And the third thing is there are other instruments that we need to use, because as I saw your map, you know, there are countries like here, you know, people are protesting there because of the utter unwillingness and lack of capacity in the Bulgarian law enforcement authorities to actually tackle complex crimes like corruption and organized crime. And we expect them that they would be able to tackle complex crime supported by a foreign state. I think that's delusional. Is there a way we could actually use EU instruments, or is that a no-go area, like the European Public Prosecutor's Office, or better use that, or the AMLA, that has taken like ages to and again, thanks a lot for a wonderful discussion. I look forward to continuing that.
So, very good questions. So I'll leave the last ones for the specialists, although I can also try to tackle them. But on the Security Council and the China question, it's a very good and deep question with not a real answer. But I don't think like this like brotherhood in the Security Council is because they're nuclear powers, and it's more like what China is doing. And when the war started, US gave them ultimatum So listen, you cannot support directly with military supplies Russia. So what Xi Jinping made back then, he summoned all his companies and everything. So listen, we have to help the Russians, but it has to be below the level of direct support. So find creative ways to do this, and they actually done it really well with providing satellite data for targeting like these new drones, because electronic warfare is a huge thing now. China is providing, and both sides have very good electronic counter warfare capabilities. But to avoid this, the Russians invented these drones which fly with a cable attached, which direct. And probably, guys, you know the amount of China is exporting to Russia like thousands times more of those optic cables than is exporting to Ukraine. It's huge. But what's going on a geopolitical level there? So for China, as long as there is a war in Europe, and to some extent U.S. also engaged here, probably they will disengage, but they're still to some way engaged. For them, it's much more easy to do their thing in Asia. So for them, it's a good investment. They keep supporting Russia as a strategic diversion for them. But should they? Why didn't they support it like more Russia? Because it's not, as you said, not Russia to lose, but they don't want Russia to become very strong or to win like decisively. First of all, because then it will be the end of the diversion. But second, China and Russia, they have a huge border, and China doesn't want Russia to be really strong. So it's like a support to a level in which this continues, but there's no decisive victory or decisive war for Russia. What is the game for U.S.? For the current administration, they have said it publicly in many times, but to say it shortly, they see, and it was in this national strategic concept last week, so they see the need to disengage from Europe and to focus more, first of all, in the North and South America, the so-called like Monroe Doctrine, but also on Asia. And so they have tried in previous administrations also to end this war. It was not possible. So now they say, okay, we do this at any cost. It doesn't really matter how it's done. It has to be over. It has to be over because we cannot waste resources on this any longer. And with those 5% which were mentioned, so now all the weapons which U.S. provides, they're bought by NATO nations and given to Ukraine. So they don't spend money currently directly. But I mean, if you follow also the economics, when the economic crisis of 2008, 2007 came, it like very big companies, they had to be sold out. So it's currently what we are seeing is it's like fire sales. Like in the accounting, you scrap this as a loss, and you sell it at whatever cost because you already said it's a total loss, or whatever you get. So it looks like this at the moment. It's like divesting from them. So for whatever reasons, good or wrong, this is a reality. In like 10 months of this administration, we see they're focused more on Americas and Asia, not in Europe. So, and Europe has stepped in to fill this gap, but it's difficult. It will take more time, but this is my answer.
I'll just quickly jump in again. Look, China likes stability. They need it for where they're going in the world. So I think, yeah, Trump may be doing this reverse Kissinger thing. Yeah, we'll see. Our current approach, again, just taking these hits from Russia, firing these AIM-120s counter-drone equipment, that costs millions and millions of euros every time. This isn't feasible for these drones that cost, what, a few hundred dollars. To respond and again to deter these attacks, Russia doesn't like these reconnaissance missions over Kaliningrad. They freak out every time we do it. Why not this defense forward, these tools, deter them further, show them the cost. There is a cost to what they keep doing to us. That's one option. And then regarding this defense forward again from Europe, the US National Defense College a few years ago concluded that it is a legitimate response to conduct counterintelligence operations on Russia. It might not be ethical, but it's legal, they've concluded. And I would say, look, the Wagner mutiny showed just how vulnerable Russia is. What did the security services do? Stand back, hedge their bets, and wait, let Wagner get to within, what, 80 kilometers of Moscow? So there is potential there if we decide to do it, and who knows, we could be doing it already. Then, from what we can do internally, yes, indeed, enhance AMLA, EPBO with enhanced cross-jurisdiction measures, support our FDI screening framework with anti-money laundering legislation, and look, our approach, these things with Lukoil potentially being bought by Governor and Timchenko, like that's outrageous. That shows just how far behind we are on this. I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Ruslan. All great points. Really quickly, on your first point, the problem for the UN and the multilateral bodies is called, and I'll give you one name, Voronkov. He's the head of the counterterrorism directorate at the UN, and he's Russian. Thank you very much. Game over. Have you ever been to an OSCE meeting where Russia sits? You're not going to get anywhere. But for all the critics of the West, I'll admit one thing. We've been on a high horse of morality, but we haven't been moral ourselves. And the Russians go around the world and say, oh, look, they invaded Iraq. They occupied Afghanistan. And yes, your country as well as mine, Ruslan, have been there. Have we fought through? Why we went there, what we did there, what the heck? This is what they're throwing at us. And I don't think taking the high horse of morality actually works. Look in the mirror, and the cupboard is bare, as the Northern Irish say. That's the thing, right? So, and the last point, can EU do stuff? I'm probably a bit critical and sad about the EU, but if you're talking about like a country, not to mention Bulgaria, I can look at many other countries of the region when they don't want to do stuff they should be doing on this front. I guess my answer is get the coalition of the heavies to come into town and slap a few people. French, German, I know it's not in their nature, UK, maybe add a few Poles into the mix who are saying, look, this is a stake we have, you're a smaller country, you're not pulling your weight, and again, I don't mean Bulgaria, I can think of other, I'm just looking at Dominica, I mean the same visit could be paid to Bratislava. Ireland, yes, Ireland's neutral, Ireland's always been neutral until the Brits come and defend us. Right? Classic case. You come in and you got to slap, unfortunately, you will not achieve this through statements of the EU that it's very concerned, or the EU which is blocked by Hungary or Slovakia at the moment, and it can be somebody else next time. So I guess, unfortunately, in this day and age, this is where we are.
I think there was another question. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Robin Peters. I'm the Deputy Ambassador of the Netherlands to Bulgaria. First of all, thank you to CSD and its partners and the Bulgarian MFA as well for putting this important topic on the agenda. The Netherlands is a country that puts the rule of law and international law front and center in its foreign policy. And I think this topic directly undermines the very foundations of that and of the stability of our societies as well. I personally think we don't put nearly enough means, resources, and expertise on countering this topic and on the linkages between crime and political power, also within the EU. My question relates to attribution, and particularly when it comes to government relations. And if you want to go public as a government with a case that you attribute, you of course want to have a very strong case with a view to getting international support, but also for your own credibility. And during a previous diplomatic posting, I worked in Moscow, and I also learned that in Russia, throughout the years, the Kremlin created a sort of environment where opportunistic individuals do things, for example, hack a Western company or a Western service, maybe blow up something, because they think that the Russian leadership or the authorities wants them to do that. And
it used to be called working towards the Führer in the
Right.
Third Reich, right? You think you know what the Führer wants.
Exactly, yeah. So when you, Casper and Ryan, when you talk about you know, Russia contracts 30-year-olds to do this and that, who is Russia exactly? Is this a concerted policy by the presidential administration to, you know, to implement these kind of measures? Are these the Russian security services? Are these low-level Russian officials in the services that have a small budget that are kind of playing around with $100 here and $100 there? Can you talk a little bit about that? Thank you.
Absolutely, happy to talk about this. As I mentioned, this manual regime that Russia now is, it's everyone knows who's in charge here. And again, I think Mark Galeotti compared it to a medieval court. It's individual power bases vying for favor with the emperor or the king. I think that's the most apt analogy. You know who Putin's hero is? It's Yuri Andropov. Andropov, he had his own school, the Andropov School of Active Measures within the KGB. That tells you all you need to know. And actually, we think Putin probably went to that school. Yes, to your point about trying to please the king, that's exactly what Yevgeny Prigozhin did. Like he was a kitchen contractor, and he rose doing this stuff, very entrepreneurial, to please Putin, to cause shalit, chaos in the West. Completely entrepreneurial, and that's why we think it's best calling them a transnational organized crime unit. What's a transnational organized crime unit? They are centralized, hierarchical, and are motivated by profit. So it's not just to please Putin; it's also to please his purse. That's the key difference between what Andropov and the Soviet Union were doing. They had these plans, they had these sabotage blueprints. USSR, I think, was mostly, or they told themselves, they were keen to win the war of ideas, ideological persuasion. Today, Putin isn't interested in ideological persuasion. He's interested in causing chaos in the West. Anybody who does that, I think, vies his favor.
Yeah, I'm kind of like almost ready to go. I mean, you've been there, so you lived through it, and you know that this is how Russia has been conducting its business for hundreds of years. Let's not give them the favor of applying our Western understanding of how life should be. And I get it, a state should have a strong case, we should know who it is. But you see, it was always the Cossacks, the irregulars, the regulars, the militia, playing the same thing. But at the end of the day, in Russia, there is not a single organization that is not run from the Kremlin. There is some curator sitting in the Kremlin. There's many curators, I get your point. But at the end of the day, it's in the Kremlin. I'll give you one example. Ruski Obraz, it's a terrorist organization based in Russia that you probably know. Ruski Obraz on a Monday was getting subsidies from the Ministry of Culture to do a patriotic event in Moscow, and on a Tuesday was killing left-wing journalists in Moscow. And the curator knew this. That's how it's organized. Now, to our research, I would say this. I encourage you to read the report because I think we lay out the case. How this is organized. It might have started off like that. Yeah, I get your point. Certainly Donbass started off like that in 2014. But it's just too big to fail now. And it is in the hands of Moscow, right, left, and center.
It's a really good question. And in Bulgaria, we are trying to do more on attribution. It takes time. The culture is to give this to keep this information in house, because often if you provide outside information, it can lead to, I mean, knowing the sources of it and things like this. So, but it's going there. But it's something important. But also another part of your question was that we need to have like perfect information in order to be legally strong when we do the attribution. And it is like this. That's why this is one of the reasons we have so few attributions. So we might think, and I alluded in my remarks, to like softening those standards, because the events are so many and we attribute so few of them, and after the attribution it should be like the punishment part of it for them, because you don't, they're related. So I think, like for example, 2 days ago there was a UK attributed China on a big cyber event, and one of the words in the one-page statement was it was like I don't know, it's like probably or highly likely or something like this. So we need to do more often things like this, because the hybrid warfare by its nature is meant to be deniable. Like he pointed out, like layers of deniability. It's not always, you see the smoking gun, but you cannot say. So I think we need to move beyond this in order to be successful.
I have one example really quickly. Some of these attacks that you've seen on our map have been done by Polish far-right radicals with military backgrounds who fought for the Belarusian unit fighting on Ukrainian side called, and here drums are rolling, Terror Battalion. Essentially far-right Dynamo Minsk hooligans who absconded from Belarus after 2020. And they said, well, we're anti-Lukashenko. Well, they are. But Dynamo Minsk is close to other Dynamo teams. And there's Dynamo in Kiev, that's more or less fine. But there's, well, although a bit too far right. But there's also Dynamo in Moscow. That's how the link was made. Now try, you know, I'm trying to sell this to audiences all around Europe, and they're looking at me like, you know, as if I was mad. So, you know, to all of you, give me a helping hand sometimes. It really is them.
Thank you. My name is Pontus Malm, the Swedish ambassador to Bulgaria, and thanks to CSD and GLOBSEC for organizing this and for inviting me. As a diplomat, I always have one comment and one question. And the comment is actually, I think, Kasper, you're partly wrong when you're saying there is a cultural divide between the West and the East of Europe when it comes to the illusions of Russia. You are so right up till 2014, I think. I think we all ignored what happened in Georgia, but I think after 2014, I think you have seen a great change. I was posted in DC in those days, in Washington, and the Baltic friends, the neighbors, were called Russophobes until the agreement arrived in Crimea. After that, they asked me, do you have the number to those guys? The American diplomats, and that has been the case. That's my ever since. I think so. But you're very right about we are losing the global narrative when it's come to Russia, or Russia is winning the global narrative. You see that also globally. That's the comment. My question actually relates to what do we do? You talk about naming and shaming. Our intelligence communities and law enforcement communities, are they too old-fashioned when it comes to this threat? We don't name and shame enough? Our intelligence community has been naming and shaming 3 countries for at least 10, 15 years when it comes to threats. It's Iran for refugee espionage, it's China for economic espionage, and it's Russia for political espionage. We've been doing that for 10, 15 years as far as I can remember. Have we received reactions? Yes, we have. But we have decided, or they have decided, that this is the right way to awaken the population, that this is a real threat. So you have to be vigilant while living in your country. And we also all remember what happened in 2022 when Five Eyes decided to go public with intelligence information. We haven't seen it after in the same way. So my question to you, is this one of the things that we should do more about, being more transparent, being more open in what we're seeing in order to rectify this situation, while at the same time respecting rule of law? Thank you.
The devil is in the first and the last sentence of your question. What can we do? And then rule of law. And that it's not that I'm criticizing it. We're conditioned to think peacefully because we've had 4 generations of peace. Okay, not in the Western Balkans, not in Ukraine, but we had 4 generations of peace. And I see it, and you're right, west, east, north, south. We just don't do certain stuff. Simple as that. Ukraine does it because it has to, and then it does it well. So I would say this. If you have moral qualms, not you, but like anybody, and if you feel like pinching Russia, pay Ukrainians to do it for you and don't ask questions. Because they're doing some fantastic stuff, honestly. They're a bit too cocky to my liking at times while talking about it. But it's just like, this is the way Russia understands force. You would know this. This, don't poke the bear. No, the bear doesn't need to be poked. It needs to be punched in the face, preferably a few times. Ryan was writing on his Stuxnet. I mean, how many Stuxnets have we launched? Maybe I don't know about something. How much, I mean, Ian Garner, who lives in Warsaw, wrote the Z Generation book. He has 200 Russians in his phone, and he still talks to them about the nonsense that's happening in Russia. Are we doing engagement like that? Are we, if they throw disinfo at us, can we throw disinfo at them? And people tell me, it's a closed internet. No, it's not. Like, I'll give you an example. One example and I'll finish. Citizens of the USSR, they exist in Russia. It's an anti-government extremist organization, which is not extremist really. They just believe the USSR exists. And I'm a Pole. I should be happy USSR is gone. But why don't we work such people? They work our crazies against us. Let's work their crazies against them. I mean, come on. And pay Ukraine to do stuff for us. Without asking questions. So then when you're put on a lie detector test, you won't know. And you will tell you the truth. I just, gave money to Ukraine, for its war effort. Park the morality, in a fridge, not in a freezer, for a second, I would say. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm not a diplomat. I can say this.
Just one very quick thing to add. Again, to your point about poking the bear. Putin already thinks like the bear has been poked. Putin's convinced that we are responsible for the color revolutions, for Euromaidan, all this stuff. So why not? Let's come out and say, like Putin's destroying your economy, he's killed over 1 million of your sons and husbands and whatnot. Do we really think this is the right path to go down? Like he already thinks we're doing it anyway, so why not do it? Punch back.
And to the final part of your question about the disclosure of the 5 eyes in the early February of the information, it was good, and you're right, it didn't repeat afterwards. Do we need to do more of this disclosure of intelligence information? I don't think that the current geopolitical context would be favorable of this. I think nowadays more and more it's about individual countries, what they're doing, not collective things like this. And also on the first part of the question, so you said you've been shaming Russia for 15 years, but they're not get shamed. But it's true that there's a distinction, for example, between Russia and China. So China, in international organizations, they're very careful, even if they did something. If you say, somebody did something, but you don't mention China, they might get away, let you get away with it. But if you mention that they're really, they want to say, okay, this is not fair. But for Russia, they're beyond the point of shaming. But the kicking and the punishment works because if you deprive them from financial resources or from capabilities, this is something that they can feel. Thank you.
Wow, this is really, I'm really enjoying this discussion. We are at time. So I would invite you, instead of stopping here, to take the discussion at lunch in a more informal fashion. But allow me first to just mention also something. We've heard, like, this discussion perfectly illustrates that we need to work on many different layers, and what is often called the whole society approach, others call it the total defense approach, resilience, and so on. So we need all these measures. We need naming and shaming. We need better operational capabilities. But something that it's not always so popular, but I'm going to mention it here just to complete the picture. It's to not underestimate also prevention. And we talk about this a lot in the counter-extremism community, early warning, early prevention. We haven't talked so much about the role of technology, social media, Telegram in recruitment, but we have in Europe, as a professional community, also become better at picking up early warning signs, picking up on violence-prone chatter online and intervening early. So I think we should use the full instrumentarium that we have and indeed learn from different fields and capitalize on the experience that we have. So I want to thank you, and once again thank GLOBSEC for co-hosting with us this discussion today. Thank you for coming. Let's continue outside during lunch. From our side, what we can say is that as CSD, and I know I talk also on behalf of GLOBSEC here, we'll continue providing evidence-based research, we'll continue exposing Kremlin's tactics and working with institutions to build their preparedness and resilience, so you can count on that. Thank you so much, and let's meet soon again to continue the discussion, but in the meantime have wonderful winter holidays. Thank you.